1, 2018. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. The Central Executive of the Police Federation on Tuesday held discussions with its delegates regarding the breakdown in wage talks with the Ministry of Finance. In a communique to its members on Wednesday, the Federation said it rejected the government's offer of 16% over 4 years. It explained that under the government's proposal, a constable would receive an increase of $3,000 in year 1 and $10,000 monthly for the next 3 years. The Federation said this is unacceptable. The Central Executive has urged its members to remain patient while it crafts a counter-proposal for submission to the government. The Federation has insisted that it will not accept a 4-year wage proposal. Tempers flared at yesterday's sitting of Parliament's Standing Finance Committee after opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips raised a warning of public dissent. Dr. Phillips delivered the warning after Finance Minister Audley Shaw said the government would not be able to begin the process of re-verifying the voters' list this fiscal year. Opposition MP Julian Robinson reminded Minister Shaw that during debate in the supplementary estimates last year, he had committed that the administration will, during this upcoming fiscal year, find $700 million needed to clean up the voters' list.
In the OPM budget, is anything there for the re-verification of the voters' list in the coming fiscal year 18-19?
No, there's nothing there for the re-verification in this coming fiscal year.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, just as a follow-up to that, I want to quote from an article in 2015. A senior member of the parliamentary opposition is alleging that the government's failure to provide the electoral office with money to purge the voters' list is part of a strategy to win the upcoming general elections. The senior opposition member said there is a need for a complete re-verification of the voters' list. According to that senior member, there is no question that the voters' list is padded with thousands of people who are either dead or have migrated. He asserts that the failure of the government to pay for the complete re-verification of the voters' list is part of a plot to win the next polls. I am quoting from an article on August 24, 2015. The senior member of Parliament is a member from Northeast Manchester, the current Minister of Finance, who came here 2 months ago when we were doing the supplementary estimates, gave a commitment that monies would be provided to start the re-verification of the voters' list. He conferred with the then Financial Secretary, made a commitment here, and now we are seeing that there has been no allocation made, and it is clear that the government has no intention of moving ahead with this re-verification.
Mr. Shaw conceded that he did make that commitment, but he said that a higher authority, that is the Cabinet of Jamaica, has since decided that the money must be allocated to help attend to urgent national security concerns. Tempers flared when Mr. Shaw told Dr. Phillips he could have cleaned up the voters' list when he was finance minister.
But since the leader of the opposition the leader of the opposition is so tuned into history. Yes. It's important to note that when a partial re-verification exercise was done in 2004, it was due to be done again in 2014. He was the Minister of Finance at that time and could very well have done it at that time.
Meanwhile, Dr. Phillips rejected suggestions from government MPs he's threatening to destabilize the country with street protests. Government MP and Minister without portfolio in the office of the Prime Minister, Dr. Horace Chang, defended Minister Shaw. Dr. Chang accused Dr. Phillips of mounting an unbecoming attack on the Finance Minister.
At a time when we have we're going through a series of fiscal program that was started by the government. We have to maintain certain fiscal balances and therefore make priority assignments. And with that responsibility remains a cabinet responsibility. The broadside on the Minister of Finance is grossly unfair and almost irresponsible. And in the face
before
and
you
the matter
speak, let me, on a point of order, Chairman, on a point of order, on a point of order, I am making no broadside against the minister. I am not impugning the member from Northeast Manchester personally. And to make that misrepresentation is to mislead the House.
The government is contemplating plans to offset a $9 billion debt owed to the Jamaica Public Service, JPS, for streetlights by selling its 20% stake in the Light and Power Company. Finance and Public Service Minister Audley Shaw told members of Parliament that the final decision to sell government shares in the JPS rests with the Cabinet, but noted that the approach would be to offer these shares to the public. At present, the government owes the JPS more than $7 billion for streetlights, while the National Water Commission and other government agencies owe the company another $2 billion. At yesterday's meeting of the Standing Finance Committee of Parliament, St. Andrews South MP Mark Golding highlighted a severe shortage of streetlights in his constituency. Shaw said the government was currently negotiating with the JPS to pay its debt, adding that the JPS should install streetlights in areas where they are needed. The Media Association of Jamaica, MAJ, has joined the Press Association of Jamaica, PAJ's call for journalists to be exempt from the proposed data protection bill. Here's more in this report. The bill seeks to safeguard the privacy of individuals in relation to personal data, as well as regulate the collection and usage of personal information. Chairman of the MAJ, Christopher Barnes, told yesterday's Joint Select Committee of Parliament to consider that the bill in its current construct will have far-reaching implications for freedom of the press and media practitioners in the country.
In its current formulation, the business of media would be devastated by the passage of the proposed bill. Not only would free speech, the receipt and dissemination of information be shackled, but additionally, the administrative burden that will be placed on the data processors, such as media, which relies heavily on the processing of personal data, will be so onerous as to signal, quite frankly, the death of our business. Having reviewed the bill carefully, we are strongly convinced that the use of personal data for journalistic purposes should be exempted from the bill carte blanche. But in addition, since the right to freedom of expression is wider than the media, we propose the following change to the definition of personal data regardless. After the current definition that you have, add the following caveat: but does not include data which, one, at the time of receipt by the data controller was already in the public domain, two, subsequently comes into the public domain through no fault of the data controller, its officers, employees, or agents.
Mr. Barnes says the bill is inconsistent with the provisions of Jamaica's Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. He says the stipulations in the Data Protection Bill threaten both the quality of news and democracy in Jamaica. The MAJ chairman says while the bill in its current form does provide for exemptions for journalists, these provisions are simply not enough. He says the powers granted to an information commissioner threatens the ability of journalists to protect their sources. Mr. Barnes also says journalists are not the only professionals who could run afoul of the legislation as it now stands.
It is also worded in such a way as to infringe on the inviolable rights against disclosure of information protected by legal professional privilege, as many law firms, given their nature, will also be defined as data controllers. The bill in its current wording already makes substantial inroads into heretofore uncharted territory, and we see no justification for derogating from long-established enactments, rules of law, and would recommend that this section be deleted simpliciter.
The MAJ chairman also had concerns about fines being proposed in the data protection bill. A breach of improperly handling information could result in a fine of 10% of a media organization's gross profit. This, Mr. Barnes says, could easily put a media entity out of business. The MAJ chairman is urging Parliament to either exempt journalists from the legislation or amend the bill to both limit the powers of the commissioner and provide greater clarity. In regional news, Latin America and the Caribbean continues to be a region with the second highest teen pregnancy rate in the world. That's according to a joint report launched recently by the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization, the United Nations Children's Fund, and the United Nations Population Fund. The majority of countries with the highest estimated adolescent fertility rates in Latin America and the Caribbean are in the Central America, with the highest rates in Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Panama. In the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic and Guyana have the highest rates, and in South America, Bolivia and Venezuela has the highest rates. The report highlights recommendations to reduce teen pregnancy, which range from supporting multi-sectoral prevention programs geared towards those in the most vulnerable situations, to increasing access to contraception and sex education, among others. According to the report entitled Accelerating Progress Toward the Reduction of Adolescent Pregnancy in Latin America and the Caribbean, the global adolescent pregnancy rate is estimated at 46 births per 1,000 girls, while adolescent pregnancy rates in Latin America and the Caribbean continue to be the second highest in the world, second only to sub-Saharan Africa. The Guyana government has beefed up security along its borders with Venezuela. President David Granger says the move is not one of aggression, but just the country ensuring that citizens living in the frontline villages are protected. More in this report from HP Nightly News, Travis Chase.
Frontline villages, including Arau, will see tightened border controls with Venezuela immediately. Cabinet was locked in meetings on Tuesday, during which President Granger reportedly instructed that additional troops be present in the villages along the Guyana-Venezuela border to protect Guyanese citizens.
The Guyana Defense Force was instructed to take certain precautions. They're not aggressive, they are purely defensive. And we have designated certain villages along the border. Whitewater is one, Baramita is another, Kaikan, Arau, to ensure that our citizens are safe. We're concerned with the safety of our citizens. And in that regard, I don't think there should be any deep concern. We have planned, in fact, at the Defense Board meeting, which was held last Thursday, I've instructed that the Guyana Defense Force should brief the Parliamentary Committee on Security to let them know what preparations are taking place, and I expect that there will be full participation both by members of the government side and the opposition side.
Venezuela's neighbors are grappling with a mounting influx of desperate migrants, fleeing a worsening economic crisis in that country. Guyana's head of state assured that the deployment of more troops to frontline villages is not to initiate any form of aggression.
We are concerned with the situation in Venezuela, and that is not a stable situation. And it is in part a response to the Venezuelan problem, because there has been a surge in crime, there has been a surge in illegal migration, and with it may come, gun running. There has been a surge in the return of Guyanese from Venezuela. So, in a sense, the complaint about recency is quite relevant, because the whole situation in Venezuela is itself recent. But it has alerted us to the need to make sure that our border location, these frontline villages, are not isolated. And we have to do much more work in years to come in developing communication, developing infrastructure, make sure children go to school, all of the services that I've been speaking about over the last few years. That is we must erase the differences between coastland and hinterland.
Particularly, residents of Arau up the Wenemu River had complained bitterly to Nightly News about the presence of unfriendly Venezuelan gangs.
In sports, retired Jamaican track and field legend Usain Bolt continues to pull in major earnings. According to highly rated US magazine Forbes, as of last year, Bolt was worth approximately £47 million, or 8.2 billion Jamaican dollars, with the majority of that made up from endorsements, including his Puma sponsorship. Bolt is said to have earned a stunning £23.2 million. That's about 4 billion Jamaican dollars a year in endorsements, but only took in 1.7 million or 182 million Jamaican from race victories. That was partially down to athletes not getting paid for Olympic and Commonwealth Game victories. But Bolt has also reportedly earned from the lucrative IAAF Diamond League, where prize money averaged £8,000 or 1.4 million Jamaican a race. A further breakdown of Bolt's earnings saw him garnering heavily from Gatorade, Visa, Digicel, Seoul Electronics and Puma, from whom he earned $7.75 million or reportedly $135 million a year. And that's the news. Do stay with us. The weather report is next. This is PBCJ's weather report. Thanks so much for staying with us. Let's start as usual with our local currents. In Kingston this afternoon, we can expect warm temperatures at just about 27 degrees Celsius. We can also expect sunny skies this evening going into our sunset at 6:33 p.m. The temperature is set to go down to just about 21 degrees Celsius. Let's take a look at what should be happening over the next 7 days for Kingston. We're expecting a 10% chance of rainfall for the rest of the week. We're also seeing a possibility of rainfall on Sunday. We're seeing 70% chance of rainfall for that day. We're also seeing going into next week temperatures between 18 and 29 degrees Celsius. Let's take a look at what's happening over there in Montego Bay, St. James today. This afternoon temperature at 27 degrees Celsius. We're seeing sunny skies with a forecast of cloudy conditions as well. In certain areas in St. James, the temperature is set to go down to a cool 6 degrees Celsius, and the sun is set to go down at 6:33 p.m. Let's take a look at what we can look forward to over the next 7 days for St. James. We're looking at 10% chance of rainfall on Friday, sunny skies on Saturday. We could get some rainfall on a Sunday, 10% chance of rainfall on Monday, but it should be pretty sunny out early next week. We're seeing temperatures between 19 and 27 degrees Celsius for the next 7 days in the western end of the island. Let's take a look at what's happening across the island though today for the rest of the parishes. We're seeing temperatures between 27 and 29 degrees Celsius. Cloudy conditions in several parishes. Cloudy conditions forecast today for Ocho Rios over there in St. Anne and in the eastern end of the island as well. Should be pretty sunny out in Black River and May Pen. We're seeing scattered showers for Negril. Let's take a look at what we can expect across the island for tomorrow. We're seeing rainfall forecast again for Negril tomorrow. Cloudy conditions as well. Possible rainfall in the southern end of the island. We're seeing cloudy conditions in the northern end of the island and sunny skies for the eastern end of Jamaica. We're seeing temperatures between 27 and 29 degrees Celsius. In our regional forecast today, for those of us who are traveling, sunny skies across the region with a forecast of cloudy conditions in several areas. We're also seeing temperatures between 26 and 28 degrees Celsius. Let's take a look at what could happen tomorrow across the Caribbean. We're seeing a possibility of rainfall over there in Nassau, Bahamas, and over there in St. George's, Grenada, where we're seeing cloudy conditions and somewhat sunny skies for the rest of the Caribbean. We're also seeing temperatures between 26 and 28 degrees Celsius. Further afield, for tomorrow, we're looking at the United States. We're seeing rainfall forecast for Los Angeles and Miami. And we're seeing a possibility of snow or rainfall over there in New York. We're seeing sunny skies forecast for Atlanta. We're seeing a minimum temperature for those areas 4 degrees Celsius with a high 31 degrees Celsius for Miami. And that's it for the weather report. Thanks so much for making it PBCJ. Remember, we are the People's Station.